Hey, it's your favorite blind insomniac here, back at it again with another video, and this time we're doing the gun game build. Basically, the gun game build is I kill a boss, I take their weapon, I have to use their weapon against the next boss. Now, I made myself some rules, so I'm not allowed to kill any just regular mini-bosses, just to get their weapons. They have to either be a boss that is in front of a quest line or in front of another boss. Those are the rules. I try to beat most of the bosses glitchless if possible. There are a couple times when I need to use glitches, and then there's also one other time that I will go into later in the video where I need to use a different strategy. Apart from that, I will be actually narrating kind of what I'm doing and what strategies I employ for every single boss, and I'm doing a much faster paced editing this time, so I hope it works out well. Right before we get into the video itself, this is my vision, so I do struggle quite a bit because I am actually blind. Again, thank you so much for 100 subscribers, and let's get right into the run. So starting off how I do most runs, I go grab the first half of the Dectus medallion, the Axe Talisman, the Spike Crack Tier, the Flask of Physic. I then end up failing the Knight's Cavalry cheese, so I don't actually have the starting runes that I would have initially liked. Anyway, with my disappointment there, I go pick up the second half of the Dectus medallion as well as Radagon Source Seal. This will be very important. Before Bleeding Grail to start my stats, but after grabbing my stats, I then head into Liurnia to go take out Bogart because I need Raya's necklace for quick transport to Volcano Manor later. I also pick up the Dexterity Knot tier while I'm here, and then go talk to Raya. I loop back over into Limgrave for the Strength Knot tier, and then go take on Morgott. My strategy for taking out Morgott is pretty simple. Basically jump attacks and charged heavies. Those are the best friends of the Iron Balls. And that is exactly how I take him out. Really not too much of a trouble. I will be mentioning my different strategies for every boss from here on out, because some of the bosses I actually needed to strategize to even come close to beating them. With Morgott dead, I go kill Kostok because he stole my runes in my first playthrough and I still haven't forgiven him. After that, I go pick up the Claw Talisman because jumping attacks are OP. Then I talk to the Warrior because I thought that I needed to do her questline in order to get the Strength Heirloom, but that was not actually the case, so rest in peace. That's why she's here for this boss fight, because, quest lines and stuff. Thought I needed her there for that. Anyway, Godric time. So it's the exact same strategy for Godric as it was for Morgott. Jump attacks, heavy attacks are the Iron Ball's best friend. But this time, he's got more health because I summoned in an NPC thinking that I needed to do her questline. I didn't. Kinda sucked. As well as I still have not upgraded the Iron Balls because they're just that fucking good. You could pretty much go the entire game without upgrading these things, and they'd be perfectly fine. The only thing that's, I guess, noteworthy about Godric more than Morgott is after his jump attack, he leaves himself super wide open for a double charged heavy. With Godric's axe in hand, I go lead the fake Commander Nile along some geysers to just cheese his health bar and grab the Commander Standard. Now, normally I wouldn't allow myself to use this weapon, but I do need this weapon to do Millicent's questline, or not so much the weapon, but rather the Golden Needle, so that's within the rules. I then run over to start Vare's questline, as smithing stones are going to be something I'm gonna have to buy a lot of, and I need runes. I then go up to Volcano Manor, pick up Golden Vow, and then a Somber Smithing Stone 6. I definitely don't die to the Invader a couple times, go back to Vare, pick up the White Cloth, and go soak it in blood. Go back to Vare one last time, and now I have access to Morgott Palace. It's at this point that I decide that I'm about ready to go fight Radahn. And, well, I go do that. Radahn is the first boss in which I actually need to use a strategy to beat. And my strategy for phase 1 is hit him, run away on Torrent, hit him again, run away on Torrent. Rinse and repeat until me and the summons whittle him down to phase 2. And then once phase 2 starts, I actually can't see a single part of Radahn other than his swords, so I run away like a little bitch. And I let the summons do everything for me, as I just physically can't do this fight. And it's really unfortunate because when I first started playing Elden Ring, I could actually see enough to fight him, and now I can't. Shows how blind I'm really getting. Okay, so after killing Radahn, my brain kind of starts melting, and I kind of forget what I'm doing, as well as I'm very comfortable with his swords, so I do a lot of running around and a lot of random grabbing different items here and there, so bear with me. So the first thing I do is progress Millicent's questline, grabbing the needle from Gowry and then curing her of her rot. I then go pick up Radahn's greatswords. I then go down and pick up Oleg because I need a summon, and the Mimic's not really going to be helpful this run. After picking up Oleg, I then go up and start Ronnie's questline, and pick up the Fingerslayer blade for her before going back to Castle Gale for the Strength heirloom. I also run through Liurnia and pick up the Faith heirloom and the Intelligence knot tier before taking on a mini boss for the Smithing Stone bell bearing. At this point, as I said, I'm very comfortable with the Radahn's greatsword, so I decide to get any mini bosses and other bosses out of my way while I can still use them. So the first thing I do is kill Red Rat of Radagon. After killing Red Rat of Radagon, I go pick up the Ritual Sword Talisman, and then I go to the Shaded Castle for Millicent's Prosthesis. After all this, I feel like I'm about ready to continue progressing, and I go take on Draconic Tree Sentinel. So my strategy for Draconic Tree Sentinel is pretty simple, and that is, yet again, jump attacks. Now, jump attacks with Radahn swords do a hell of a lot of damage, and it is phenomenal for that. But the other thing that I did was I employed the strategy of not getting hit, getting good, and, for the most part, trying to stay on the Draconic Tree Sentinel's shield side. Because when you do get hit by the shield, it does less damage, the attacks are a lot slower, and they are a lot easier to figure out what he's about to do. That being said, if you are on his shield side, he will also tend to try to jump back more, meaning that you're going to have to close distance through the fireballs a lot more often. I pick up a Ritual Shield before taking on Godfrey. Now, my strategy for Godfrey is actually really tedious and very long, but it seemed to be the best strategy after actually being stuck here for a while. And the strategy that I came up with is bait out his spin attack and then counter with a charged heavy. And with a charged heavy, you can build up stance on him, and then you can normally stance break him, which is really, really helpful. It gives me a good amount of time to kind of regain my nerves, and that's really what gets me killed the most. So yeah, it's wait for spin, hit to win. With DTS and Godfrey dead, I then go pick up the Intelligence heirloom, and then continue with Millicent's questline, which leads me to killing Skinny. I now have Skinny's weapon. So I take Skinny's weapon, and I barely upgrade it, and then I go take on Fatty. I realize I need to upgrade stuff, so I go get the first bell bearing. At this point, it's time I take on Morgott. Okay, well, with how fast and agile Morgott is, and how difficult it is to actually hit him just on my own, with him spinning around as much as he does, I can't actually see him, so I kind of let him attack Oleg, and then from him attacking Oleg, I would go up behind him and I would charge up a charged heavy and I'd unleash that into his back. So basically I was just giving Morgott back shots the entire fight, and then with the riposte I ended up doing a lot of damage. So that's kind of how I took on this fight. Normally this isn't the approach I'd go for, but with my low health and my sight issues, this is kind of my only way of being able to fight. With Morgott dead and his sword being one of the better ones in the game, I end up doing another runaround. First thing I do is pick up the next Somber Smithing Stone bell bearing. I then go pick up the other regular bell bearing. I also then go kill some tree avatars for their respective physic tiers, and I mean a lot of tree avatars. I then go progress Millicent's questline and forget about it at this point. I go pick up a Somber 7 from the sewers. I do a really cool jump skip to get to an elevator to skip a good portion, and then I kill Minimogue. After killing Minimogue, I then do another cool stance break skip to get down to the bottom of the Frenzied Flame ending. And my reasoning for going this way instead of going through the twin gargoyles was because I didn't want to have to use their weapons against anything, and Morgott's Curse Sword is pretty good. So at this point, I go take out Via's champions. So I move on to Fire Giant. So with Morgott's Curse Sword having bleed, it makes Fire Giant actually pretty doable. And for phase 1, I focus on breaking his anklet, as well as just doing light attack spam, and occasionally, if he runs away, I jump on Torrent, and then I do a jumping heavy off of Torrent to get in some extra stagger damage and just some basic regular damage. I end up getting lucky and getting a couple staggers in phase 1, so that's kind of how phase 1 goes. Now, phase 2 is a little bit different just because his main weak point is his hands, but I am also a scared little bitch with 30 health at this point, so instead, I go and take on his legs. Basically what I do is I jump on Torrent anytime he runs away, and I get in between his legs and I just get in 1 or 2 attacks, and that's kind of how I play out the rest of this fight. It's slow, it's tedious, but it is the safest way I have found to reliably take down Fire Giant. Now the bleed did help a lot, and another thing that helps a lot is if you hear fire, run the fuck away. After beating Fire Giant, I pick up his whip, which apparently you have to pay for. Just disrespectful. And I go take that exact weapon and I turn it against the deer. So my strategy for fighting the deer is pretty simple. Basically, just hit it and don't get hit. There's really nothing for a strategy here. It doesn't do enough damage, it doesn't heal enough, it's barely even a boss, so it wasn't much to kill it. With the deer dead, I pick up his weapon and I immediately go to the Godskin Duo. So Godskin Duo, just because of the nature of the fight, I do summon in Bernal. Every single time, I will never not summon him because it makes the fight fair, and then I make the fight unfair. Basically, the strategy I have going into this fight is have Bernal and whatever summon I have, they take on Skinny and I take on Fatty. And my entire goal is to stay alive, do a little bit of damage here and there when I have an opportunity to, but mostly just distract Fatty and stay alive. Once they take out Skinny, and Fatty normally enters phase 2, I jump up on top of a pillar once he breaks it, so I don't get hit. This doesn't always work, sometimes he rolls over the pillar and will kill me, but this works most of the time. When it's a 3-on-1 in my favor, at this point, it's basically we stun lock the boss until we kill it, and we rinse and repeat. Each time one of them spawns back in, I charge up a couple heavies, do a couple jumping attacks, Oleg does his thing, and Bernal does his mega stance damage. So overall, the fight isn't too bad with Bernal in it. So Malakith. Unfortunately, Malakith is one of these bosses that if I didn't have summons and I don't have a lot of luck on my side, I can't beat. There's a few attacks that he does that just completely make me Helen Keller because he's in the air and I can't see him and I can't hear him, and hearing is my second sight, so can't really dodge if I can't hear. The other thing is he gets really dark in phase 2, because of his black armor, so I can't see him in phase 2 very well as his damage is fucking stupid. It is way too much damage. So basically every single time I beat him, it is based on luck, but I play overly aggressive because I know for the most part I cannot dodge many attacks, so my whole goal is to do as much damage to him as quickly as I can and enough stance damage to posture break him before he can hit me enough times to kill me. That is always my strategy. It is unfortunate, but the blind gotta do what the blind gotta do, I guess. With Malakith dead and his weapon in hand, I have to fight the hardest boss in the game, Gideon. Now, that may sound like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm being deadass. With this much health and not very much damage and everything just sucking with Gideon spamming his ass off, I couldn't kill him. I spent hours here trying to kill him. I tried so many different strategies, different talismans, different buffs, different everything. I couldn't do it. So, because I made myself a rule a long time ago, if I'm stuck on a boss for too long and I don't think I can do it, I can grab a different thing. I grab Frenzy Burst and just melt his ass. Anyway, after wasting literal days on Gideon, I now go continue and I go take on Godfrey. So my strategy for Godfrey is actually pretty simple. And because this is a great sword and how slow it is, charged heavies surprisingly are not actually an option. So this time, instead, I do one rolling and one light attack. And those work great. They build up a lot of stance damage, which is really surprising considering they're not really that stance effective. Apart from that, any of his big stomp attacks where he pulls up the earth itself into this volcano-y type of thing, I basically jump the second stomp so I don't get hit by it, and then run the fuck away. Dodge at the last second just in case the shockwave hits me, because it has before, and it's kind of inconsistent. Anyway, that's basically what I do for phase 1, and phase 2, I kind of just hope for the best. I try to get a stance break as quickly as I can in phase 2, and any of his grab attacks you can dodge into them, which is scary, and sometimes they'll still get you, but I got lucky. But if you dodge into them or around to his right side, a lot of the time you can just strafe them, which is also really surprising. But same thing here, light attacks, maybe a charged heavy here and there, but that's basically how I take out Godfrey. Okay, so we take Godfrey's axe and we start using it against Radagon, and honestly, this axe is really good against him. The rolling light is really bad because of the range it does compared to other colossal weapons with their poke, so keep that in mind, maybe don't do those. Apart from that, charged heavies are just monstrous in damage to Radagon. It's perfect. There's a lot of openings for charged heavies, as well as sometimes you can get away with 2 of them. Jumping attacks are also very, very beneficial, and they work really well against Radagon. I am also very comfortable with this fight because I do it on and offline. I help a lot of people beat him on other save files just because I do enjoy his fight that much. So on to the Elden Beast phase, what I do is I run behind him and just immediately start doing charged heavies. And I get really lucky where I do a couple charged heavies and then he still stays in melee mode without going and starting rings. So I was able to immediately continue charged heavying him and I was able to break his stance, allowing me to even more charged heavy and then riposte. At this point, then he does rings, and he also pulls out Elden Stars, which gives me a good opportunity to put in even more damage into him, and also Oleg was here the entire fight, which just made things that much easier. Overall, Elden Beast, if you have a colossal weapon, is basically like Elden Slug. Like, he's easy to beat. With Elden Beast dead, I grab the America's Hammer because it was just easier for stats, and then I go fight Estelle. Now, my strategy for Estelle is just non-existent. I basically just try to hit him anytime I can and try to tank as much as I can and heal as much as I can. Estelle's another one of these bosses that I just can't see, so I don't fight him regularly, considering he's optional. But there's just really not much I can do against this fight, though it's kind of just up to Oleg to carry me through the fight. So, unfortunately, the Bastard Stars suck, that's Estelle's weapon, and my next fight was Nile, and Commander Nile does summon in two little fuckers, and Oleg just would not go after the two summons he summons in. Annoyed the hell out of me. I tried for hours and hours, I couldn't really make any progress, so in the nature of me wanting to actually get this video out this year, and not in 2025, I decided that it was okay to cheese Nile. So we cheese Nile. So with Nile dead, I end up wandering through the consecrated snowfields until I find Liturgical Town. Once I get into Liturgical Town, I end up having some fun with these guys. I definitely don't die. Before going to the Halid Tree, I decide that ants are now my worst enemy in the existence of the game. They keep on pushing me off the tree branch, but it is what it is. And then I parry this Misbegotten for a nice little elevator skip because I didn't really feel like running through all of that. And now it's time for Loretta. And Loretta was really going to be a fight that I was worried about, and then Oleg is just her counter. I pretty much didn't need to do anything. I did some jump attacks here and there. I healed if she hit me, but Oleg basically just shoved her in a corner and just fucking fidget spinnered her to death. It was awesome. I was giggling my ass off throughout the whole fight. With Loretta's weapon in hand, I go grab Great Crest Shield Talisman for extra damage negation, and then I go take on Mohg. Now, Mr. Mohg, Lord of Blood, is a pretty tough fight, especially in phase 2 where every single attack he does leaves a trail of blood fire all over the place. But if you kind of direct him where you want the blood fire to go, you end up having a lot of room in the arena to do what you want to him. His stance also isn't super bad, so you can break his posture pretty quickly, and that's what I focused on. I focused mostly on getting his stance broken, as well as I kind of let Oleg do what Oleg does best and carry me through the fight. So Malenia is normally a really tough fight, but I did take Mohgwyn's spear to her fight, and I put on as much armor as I could so I could kind of just tank everything. I also put extra damage negation buffs into my Flask of Physic before going in, and basically the strategy going into this fight was use my Ash of War and just spam it. Keep myself as close to full health as I could, have Oleg be the one who takes the majority of the damage, and just Ash of War spam. It works way too well. If you want to make Malenia into the easiest boss in the game, this is the way to do it. I never thought of this before until this run, but this was by far the easiest I had ever beat Malenia, and it is just flat out broken, to be honest. It's also really fun. So I take the Hand of Malenia against Rennala. And you may be wondering why I'm leaving Rennala, one of the easiest bosses, till almost the last boss, and that is because Rennala has two things that she can give. One of them being a staff that takes 60 intelligence. That wasn't happening this run. So instead, I take hers and then immediately use my freebie, being Rykard, because he is a gimmick boss, and I no longer have to use Rennala's weapon. So there's not really a strategy for Rykard because it is a gimmick. It's basically Ash of War, charged heavies, jumping attacks, you know, the standard stuff. Just hit him a bunch, he'll die. He's not really that difficult of a boss. And the last boss I take on in this is Fortisax. Fortisax is actually one of my least favorite bosses in the game, if not the franchise. I hate this boss with every fiber of my being. I think it is a horrible fight. So that being said, that's why I left him till last, and I'm using probably the most broken sword in the game against him. I still have one hell of a fight because Fortisax's arena is just completely pitch black to me other than lightning, and I can't see anything else. Not a very fun fight, not a very eventful. I just basically, the second I can hit him, I hit him. And I try to tank everything else, and I try to do as much damage as I can. It's really just a sad and pathetic fight that there's no strategy. It's just try to survive and try to do damage. Again, thank you guys so much for 100 subscribers. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, maybe sub. I do a lot of challenges, and this was by far the hardest one that took me the longest to do. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day or night or whatever you're doing. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Goodbye.